All right.
Sorry, have you started the recording yet?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Well, I will definitely get started then. So thanks for setting this all up, Elois. Really appreciate it. And thank you everyone who is showing up. It looks like there are still some people who are coming in. We're at 29 people so far, which is great. I took a peek at the attendee list, and it looks like it's a really nice group of folks who are affiliated with the section in some form or fashion already, and then maybe others who are new to learning about the section. I know there was a bit of a mix-up. There was a different description on the registration page for this business meeting that sort of indicated that it was a webinar. So we're not quite sure how that happened, but just to clarify for anyone who is joining, that this is a business meeting for the Digital Scholarship section. And here's roughly the agenda that we're going to be going over in this meeting today. So we'll be sharing a bit about the background and history of the section, talking about the work that the Executive Committee has done over the past year or so, and then giving a description of the committee discussion groups and also an editorial board that make up the section. We'll be talking about the upcoming Midwinter meeting and also the annual conference, and of course sharing opportunities to either get or stay engaged with the section. So today, Chelsea and I are going to be your hosts for this webinar, or business meeting, I should say. So I'm Rita Marshall. I'm the chair of the section. I am the director of research services at the UC Riverside Library. And I think I'll just introduce Chelsea since she'll be taking over for the second half. So Chelsea Rowell is the Digital Scholarship and History Librarian at Boston College Libraries. We are both members of the Executive Committee. So a bit about the background and history of the section. In case you aren't familiar, some of you may be. The founding interest groups for the section are the Digital Curation Interest Group, Digital Humanities Interest Group, and Numeric and Geospatial Data Interest Group. And what's funny is that initially, so I was part of the Digital Curation Interest Group, and we were pursuing this path to become a section. And in order to do so, you have to submit a petition to the ACRL board. You have to have a certain number of members of your interest group, and you have to basically get signatures saying people think that this is a good idea, and then submit that along with some other documentation to the ACRL board as your justification. So we were going along this process, and as part of that process, the Digital Curation Interest Group was reaching out to other related interest groups. Two of them that we reached out to were the Digital Humanities Interest Group and the Numeric and Geospatial Data Interest Group. And as part of those conversations, we sort of realized as we were halfway down this path to becoming potentially the digital curation section, we were like, hang on, there are so many synergies here between the three interest groups. All three interest groups were growing really quickly, had a lot of members, and you know, when we had deeper conversations with the leaders of these other interest groups, we sort of realized that they were also considering their future. Would they potentially become a section at some point? So we had actually already, some of you may recall, the Digital Curation Interest Group had already started collecting signatures from people for, you know, this path to becoming the Digital Curation section. And then after this really sort of fateful meeting, discussion that kind of threw everything into action at ALA 2016 in Orlando, that's when the three interest groups came together, had a serious conversation about this, and decided, you know what, maybe we should be the Digital Scholarship section instead. So in October of 2016, we submitted this petition that was formed by all three interest groups to the ACRL board. And in February of last year, we learned that the petition was approved by the board. And in September of last year, DSS became an official section. So now that you know just a little bit about the history of the founding interest groups and how we became a section and somewhat of the timeline for how we became a section, I wanted to also delve into a bit of, you know, what is the work that the Executive Committee has been doing. The Executive Committee is comprised of members of those founding interest groups. So Andrew and I are coming from the Digital Curation Interest Group. Alex and Chelsea are coming from the Digital Humanities Interest Group, and Brett and Joel are coming out of the Geospatial and Numeric Data Interest Group. And the group of us came together and had to really figure out together how do you start a new section. So ACRL has not had a new section in quite a long time, around a decade or longer, if I'm not mistaken. I should probably know that exact number. But we all came together and had varying amounts of experience with ACRL. I would say from my perspective, I really only had the experience of being part of an interest group, so didn't have a strong understanding of what all of the various ACRL structures looked like. So we actually started meeting just after ALA Annual last year, and some of those initial things that we did, even though the section was not technically in effect, we were aware that there was a lot of work to be done to sort of get everything in motion so that we could kick off the section in its official nature in September of 2017. So the first, one of the first conversations beyond, hey, who are you? It's nice to get to know you, was really talking about the formation of the committee and discussion group structure, which we're going to go into a little bit more next. So everyone but me was able to make it to ALA Annual in 2017 and hosted what seems like a really fruitful conversation, bringing together folks from the different interest groups for sort of the last time in the guise of being part of an interest group and talking about what people were interested in. We were able to share out some of those ideas for what the potential structure might look like. And people had a lot of great feedback, great questions, clarifying questions for us that helped us as we were coming up with what that committee and discussion group structure could look like. So one of the things to maybe note at this point is that we made a decision to have some of the functional components of the section be committees and have the discussion groups as sort of the topical vehicle for people to have conversations about things like research data management, numeric and geospatial data, digital humanities. So sort of transferring over from that interest group to that discussion group structure. And that'll make a little bit more sense when we talk about what that actually looks like. But initially, we had sort of considered that everything would be a committee. So we would have a membership committee, we would have a research data management committee, and we just thought, wow, you know, maybe the committee structure is not the right structure for all of these various components of the section. We thought that it would actually be much more flexible to have the topical areas covered by discussion groups. So we also, there was just a lot of other work to do, and we're sort of learning day by day about ACRL and about sections. So we were, of course, looking at what a lot of other sections looked like. One of the very first things that we were sort of coached by ACRL was that we needed to identify a nominating committee chair and membership for that committee. And that committee is really important. They help identify candidates to basically run on the ballot. And we'll talk more about that later on in this business meeting. We also put out our first call for volunteers. So I think a lot of people who are attending right now actually shared their interest at that time, which is great. We were able to place a lot of people. And we partnered with the Literatures and English section to co-sponsor an emerging leader. Lindsay's here. I just saw her in the attendees. Hi, Lindsay. So that was very exciting for us. And we also submitted pre-conference and program proposals for the ALA annual conference this year. So because we didn't have that committee structure situated just yet, that was something that we did as the executive committee. We officially launched. I admit, at least from my perspective, it definitely already felt like we were a true section because we had been working throughout that summer on all sorts of section-related things, but we officially launched on September 1st. This was around the time where we wrote those committee charges. So again, we had sort of outlined, here are what we envision the committees looking like. Here are the discussion groups that we think would be great. And then we were able to actually say, okay, well, what's the charge for each of these groups? We had all of these awesome volunteers who had shared their interest in being part of the new section, and we matched those volunteers with committees and discussion groups. And we also, this is just a bit of sort of housekeeping, but we archived records from the previous interest groups in preparation for the transition to a new ALA Connect. We also began planning for our in-person meeting and social at ALA Midwinter, which is coming up. Then this winter, some of the work that we've been doing, we started recruiting members of the DataQ Editorial Board, which is led by a member of the Executive Committee, Andrew Johnson. We began planning for this meeting, this very meeting that we're having right now. We also initiated communication with the new chairs, conveners, and committee members. So there was a period, of course, where we had reached out and we had made these appointments, and you know, folks probably were not necessarily sure about, you know, what are my next steps. So what we wanted to do was, as we were still learning from ACRL, as we were still learning, you know, amongst ourselves how to kind of structure out these communications, we were able to reach out to all of the chairs. And there was some work to do to actually fill some of the roles that ended up not being filled initially. But we were able to situate them with information about, you know, what do they need to know about ACRL to get started? What do they need to know about, you know, using these platforms that are available through ACRL? What do they need to know about, you know, other expectations for being a chair or for being a convener for a discussion group, and what kind of guidance can we provide them so that we're not just kind of saying, okay, get started. You know, we were cognizant that this is a new section and wanted to get them started on the right foot. We also created all of the internal and external listservs in conjunction with ACRL. And so the internal listservs are, of course, the lists for the committees. So those are not something that anyone can join in. But the discussion groups, on the other hand, all have external listservs. And part of the job of the discussion groups is really to cultivate that space and to have a lot of active conversations on that space. So you all probably saw that those are now active, and we've invited people to join in on those discussion group listservs. What's next? The work does not stop. So we are preparing for ALA Midwinter and also annual, of course, the conferences. That's something that we're kind of doing year-round, especially as we get started. And since the program planning committee will not necessarily be getting started until they're planning for ALA annual in 2019. So continuing to help support committees and discussion groups. Part of that is by bringing together what we're deeming the advisory group for the digital scholarship section. So this is just a group that's comprised of the committee chairs and the conveners. We sort of thought, you know, maybe there's a way to make them feel less siloed in this very new work. And maybe, you know, one solution would be to have an optional meeting, or at least a list, where people can ask these questions and trade strategies for how they're doing their work. We're also continuing to work on DSS documentation. So we have documentation that's sort of piecemeal, but a lot of sections have really great established section manuals and governance procedures. And so we're trying to really look to those other established sections to see, you know, we don't need to recreate the wheel. What can we use? What do we think fits with our section? But then also what needs to be built out as well. This is where we give a major shout out to Megan Griffin at ACRL, because Megan has definitely been our partner in getting this up and running. So there's just this fantastic amount of information about running an ACRL section and being involved in these different layers of the organization. And so Megan has been really great, really patient. You know, honestly, I have been emailing her so frequently over the past 9 months, I would say, just with all of these miscellaneous questions that, you know, sometimes I have half a question and I have to figure out how am I going to even formulate this, but she, you know, steps in and she meets me in the middle, and, you know, she's definitely helped with kind of navigating a lot of the decisions and understanding, you know, what is really our role as members of the executive committee. So just wanted to make sure that all of her help is really recognized and highlighted in this business meeting. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit more about the overall structure, and some of you may be familiar if you poked around on the ACRL website for the section. You would see basically the same information, but we just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of it while we have the time. So here's the slate of committees that are part of the section. And next I'm going to go through these one by one and provide just a little bit more information about the charge for each. So first up, we have the Conference Program Planning Committee. The chair is Krista White, and the charge is to plan the section's program for ALA Annual. So developing proposals, identifying and working with speakers, determining budget needs, requesting funding from ACRL, and of course publicizing the program should it be accepted. You'll see on each of these slides we have this little learn more section. We're cognizant that many people will probably be watching the recording or just looking at the slides that we share later on, so that is a link. It's a quick link that you can use for any of these committees and discussion groups to learn more about them if you're interested. There's also the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. The chair is Kristen Mates. And the charge is to identify and advocate for appropriate action related to equity, diversity, and inclusion in digital scholarship. To also encourage DSS membership to enact anti-oppressive practices in the digital scholarship community. The Liaison Committee, this is interesting because this is a required ACRL committee. So right now, Matt Hunter is our fearless chair, and there are no other committee members at the moment. And we're still kind of trying to figure out the best way to approach this required committee. And initially, you know, he's been kind of talking to other people on different sections who are serving in this role and learning how they've optimized this role, which sort of, so you're on the liaison committee for the section, but you're also on ACRL's liaison committee. So there are a few different layers to this. But with what we know right now, it will potentially be a really powerful way for us to connect out with other professional and academic organizations that have similar interests to our section. The membership committee, led by Linda Kellum, so they're developing and executing membership campaigns focused on increasing engagement, retention, recruitment, and promotion of the section. The nominating committee, this was the first committee. You might recall I mentioned a few slides ago, this was the first committee that we had to appoint people to back when we got started last summer. And we're getting to that point again where this is actually one of the first appointments that I'm going to make in February, actually probably starting quite soon. And this group really needs to identify a diverse pool of potential candidates for the executive committee. So they're finding nominees who want to run for vice chair or chair-elect, secretary, and executive committee members at large. The outreach committee is chaired by Elizabeth Andreasik-Gives, and the charge is to assist the section and its committees with publishing and communication projects. So this is quite potentially a very far-reaching committee, of course, and one of the things that I think the executive committee is keen on doing is really working with Elizabeth and other members of the committee to gauge their thoughts on, you know, what are kind of the low-hanging fruit, what are the things that we should be prioritizing to get started with the outreach. One of the things that I have a particular interest in is really getting a social media presence potentially for the section, potentially on Twitter, but possibly other platforms as well. So as you can see, oversee the communication activities of Editorial Board, DSS website, email list. There's potentially a lot within the scope of this committee. So we want to work with the chair and the members to make this really manageable. And the Professional Development Committee. This is chaired by Karen Hagenboom, and the charge is to support continued development of section members by providing professional development opportunities beyond the conferences. So this is exciting. I mean, this is a group that will be really well positioned to help us develop webinars, opportunities for members to, share what they're working on with the rest of the section. Excuse me. So I'm really quite excited about what this committee will be able to do. So now I'm actually going to switch it over to Chelsea. I need to figure out how to pass this presenter ball to her, and she will finish out the rest of our slides.
Hi, everyone. While Brianna is passing the speaking banana to me, I will just go ahead and say a quick note and return to the definition of a discussion group. So some of you who have been a part of the Digital Humanities Interest Group Committee, one of the the Digital Humanities Interest Group, which was one of the founding interest groups of the Digital Scholarship section, may remember that DHIG originated as a discussion group, an ACRL discussion group. And after a certain amount of time, it had to demonstrate its engagement in growing community and make a case to become an interest group. So within ACRL, there are essentially two different kinds of discussion groups. One is under the auspices of the ACRL overall, and those discussion groups have an expiration date. You start them in response to emerging topics, and the expectation is that after a certain amount of time, it'll grow into an interest group, and then that interest group will either expire because the conversation has, taken place, or one option, of course, is to grow into another kind of unit, as the Digital Curation Interest Group led the initiative to form the Digital Scholarship section. In contrast, there are discussion groups that exist under the auspices of an ACRL section. These discussion groups have no expiration date at all, and so the huge advantage of discussion groups that exist under the auspices of a section is that they're kind of permanent sites for conversation on a topic, and they have but they have session meeting slots at ALA Midwinter and ALA Annual. And so it's an opportunity to develop consistent programming around that topic without necessarily having to get an official program approved. So with all of that background, we have formed the following discussion groups under the auspices of the Digital Scholarship section. They focus on data information literacy, digital collections, digital humanities, numeric and geospatial data services, open research, research data management, and visualization. So as Brianna did with the committees, I'll say a few quick words about each discussion group. The Data Information Literacy Discussion Group is convened by Megan Sapp-Nelson, and the purpose of the group is to provide a collaborative forum for discussion about data information literacy in academic and research libraries. The Digital Collections Discussion Group will be led by Susanna Conrad. I think it's interesting to think about how digital collections within the Digital Scholarship section overlaps with the work of units and other ALA divisions or sections. So for example, ALECS, which is the Association for Library Collections and Technical Services, obviously has a huge stake in the creation and management of digital collections. And there are other interest groups like a digital conversion interest group, digital preservation interest group. We think that this discussion group can certainly partner with those other communities within the ALA, And then because it exists under the auspices of the digital scholarship section, it may be that we're focusing on digital collections as data and how librarians partner with faculty and students to create digital collections either in the classroom or as part of research projects led by faculty. The next discussion group is the Digital Humanities discussion group, which will be led by Dan Tracy. And it preserves the digital, the communities that formerly made up the Digital Humanities interest group, which, was subsumed into the digital scholarship section overall. So it remains a forum for discussion about the relationship between DH and libraries. Similarly, the Numeric and Geospatial Data Services discussion group preserves the community, continues the community that existed in one of the founding interest groups of the section that will be led by Nicole Kong, and its intention is to provide a forum for providing or receiving insight into examples of and training on how data services are developed and delivered in academic libraries. The last couple of discussion groups, I think, speak to the topical strengths that the digital curation interest group brought to the digital scholarship section. So one is the open research discussion group, which will be led by Abigail Gobin. And it's a space to discuss support for open research and reproducibility. There's also the research data management discussion group, which will be led by Anna Sackman, which focuses on ways of supporting the research data lifecycle. Lastly, I believe, is the visualization discussion group, which will be led by Jesse Stigman. And it's a place to talk about data visualization and services to support data visualization within academic and research libraries. So to wrap up discussion groups, I think the advantage is creating a space during midwinter and annual to continue these conversations. Some of you here, I believe, will be leading some of these discussion groups. And so it's an opportunity to cultivate a community both through your email list and through professional development opportunities that you might offer in collaboration with the Professional Development Committee. And it's also an opportunity to lead a program, hopefully at one in-person conference a year. And that could be a set of lightning talks, it could be a set of panel presentations, it could be roundtable discussions, whatever format is suitable for the conversation that you want to have on this topic. So the last kind of unit that exists under the auspices of this section is an editorial board. We have one of those, and it's the DataQ editorial board, led, as Brianna mentioned, by Andrew Johnson, who's a member of the executive committee, and it's essentially a Q&A platform related to research data in academic libraries. Brianna, would you mind dropping the link to the DataQ website into the chat? I don't think it's currently clickable from the slides. So anyway, DataQ operates this independent website, and we're working on kind of getting the operations of DataQ operationally under the auspices of ACRL and the digital scholarship section. So we have a lot of events coming up at the 2018 Midwinter meeting in Denver and the annual conference in New Orleans. I guess the most central event to the section taking place in just a couple weeks in February in Denver is the Digital Scholarship Section business meeting at ALA Midwinter. That will have two parts, but very quickly at the top we'll essentially recap this meeting in which you're currently participating, but then the majority of the business meeting will be taken up by a structured networking activity. So we're going to do a couple of rounds of asking people to find a pair, pair up with one other attendee and exchange answers to the following two questions. What challenge do you bring to that meeting or to the Digital Scholarship Section community? So what challenge do you bring, but also what are you hoping to get from and give to the Digital Scholarship Section community? And we're going to do that thought exercise, that pair-to-pair talking exercise 2 or 3 times, and then we'll conclude with a larger group discussion, and hopefully that will really inform the activities of the executive committee and all of the other committees and discussion groups going forward by really understanding the challenges and aspirations of the section membership. The other gathering that we'll host at ALA Midwinter is purely social on Saturday, February 10th, in the evening at 6 p.m. at Euclid Hall. You can join us for a couple of drinks and fine conversation with the other members of the section who will be attending. It will be a pay your own way, and I imagine that many people who show up for the social may opt to stay for dinner also at Euclid Hall. So that's an option if you don't have other dinner plans that evening. Looking ahead to the annual conference in New Orleans, we were pleased to have our pre-conference proposal accepted. So we will be offering a half-day pre-conference called Deconstructing Digital Scholarship Consultations in the Library. It'll be facilitated by current members of the executive committee. And what we're hoping to do is to expose, I think our next slide is learning outcomes. So pre-conference participants will be able to, articulate how digital scholarship fits into higher ed and why academic libraries are engaging in digital scholarship, to identify, to be able to build upon the skills that they already have in conducting reference interviews and apply those skills to the somewhat similar but somewhat different digital scholarship consultation. Along those lines, to identify the expertise that they already bring to digital scholarship, whether that is related to metadata creation or subject matter expertise within a particular discipline or issues related to scholarly communication. We may not feel like it, but we come to the consultation with a lot of pre-existing knowledge. And finally, we hope that participants will be able to articulate the basics of project management so that they can incorporate those considerations into conducting an initial consultation about the feasibility of a project and its budget and timeline. And finally, and most importantly, by bringing all of these things together, participants will build their self-efficacy and confidence as digital scholarship consultants. In addition to the pre-conference, the section is co-sponsoring a conference program called Bridging the Gap, Supporting Subject Liaisons to Become Ambassadors for Digital Scholarship in Academic Libraries. Brianna will be a member of that panel, and you can view the session description to see the other members of the panel. And I should add that I think that both the pre-conference and this program are intended to be complementary. You know, your title may not be Digital Scholarship Librarian, but you may be called upon to engage in digital scholarship activities on your campus. And so the pre-conference about deconstructing digital scholarship consultations is for anyone who might be pulled into a project consultation, whether they are subject librarians, metadata experts, technologists, just to kind of provide some of the vocabulary. And then the program focuses specifically on subject liaisons. And in addition to the pre-conference and program, we'll have tons of meetings. It will be the first the ALA in New Orleans will be the first conference where we're fully present. So not only having an executive committee meeting and an all committee meeting, but each of these individual discussion group meetings and whatever programs they develop. So these have yet to be scheduled, but we will, of course, disseminate broadly on the Digital Scholarship section email list, as well as the ALA conference scheduler. So lastly, and most importantly, what are your opportunities to stay engaged? The main ones are to sign up for discussion group email lists if you're particularly interested in visualization or open research or data services. Any of those discussion groups has its own email list, which can, it's a resource of expertise that you can draw on in your work. You can also volunteer for a 2-year term as a member of any of these committees or discussion groups or the DataQ Editorial Board. I'm trying to think when that 2-year term starts. I think that would be starting July 1st, 2018, going through June 30th, 2019. But at any rate, if you're interested in any of those roles, you can apply by this February 15th. And lastly, you can participate in the election and vote for executive committee members. The election will take place over email. If you're a member of the ACRL and the Digital Scholarship section, you will get an email ballot and you can vote in that election. So those roles for which people are running are vice chair / chair-elect, secretary, and member at large. So with that, we end the portion of the meeting where Brianna and I share with you all of the things that we've been working on over the past year. And now we welcome any questions from you, which you can share via the chat box. I think some may have come in while I was talking. So Kristen Mapes asks, will committee meetings become an option starting in midwinter 2019? Brianna, make sure that I am answering this correctly, please. I thought that committee meetings would start at the 2018 annual conference in New Orleans. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's correct. At least for folks who can make it to that conference.
That's right.
We're of course understanding, and one of the things right now that we'll be kind of initiating next is starting to really follow up with people to see what is their availability, who will make it to ALA. And I've been having some conversations with Megan recently, and one of the things that I think ACRL is trying to do in general is really move more toward having in-person meetings at ALA annual rather than midwinter. So it's also something where I think it's very likely for the section that we will be present at ALA annual to a greater extent than midwinter. I think it's doubtful that we'll have a full sort of cohort, everybody at midwinter, and that's definitely not an expectation that we have for committees or discussion groups. Hopefully that helps answer. But I actually, in terms of physically meeting at midwinter, it's a good question because it's making me think about talking to ACRL about what kind of time slots we will have. We definitely will have an all committees meeting. So basically they're going to give us a really big room if we ask for it, and then all of the committees can sort of meet concurrently in that space. It's really more a question of, will we have enough slots for discussion groups to meet at midwinter as well? Feel free to chime in if that didn't kind of fully answer your question.
Another question came in from Teresa Schultz. She says she wasn't able to listen, only watch partly, and will a recording be sent out? The answer to that is yes. A recording will be sent out, and the slides will also be sent out to the Digital Scholarship section email list. Now I'm wondering if I should be typing that answer instead of speaking that answer, since this person isn't able to listen. So I will do that as well.
Does anyone else have any other questions or even comments or feedback at this stage? I know that most people probably tuned in just as sort of an informational thing to kind of get caught up and hear from the executive committee. So I also don't want to hold everybody, as everyone's kind of like, hey, we're ready to leave. We heard what we wanted to hear. So we will be, of course, reaching back out, trying to communicate out over the main DSS list. And for anyone who is on a committee, a convener for a discussion group, chairing a committee, please do reach out to us with your questions, because, you know, I'm sure many of you also are like, I have ideas, how do I get started on all this? You know, there are lots of moving parts. So I empathize with you, because I feel like I was in that position, Chelsea was in that position, we were in that position as the new executive committee trying to figure out how to make it all work. So I definitely also, you know, please use us, and we want to be a resource for you. So even if you have, you know, quote unquote silly questions, please do contact us and let us, you know, help you kind of think through how you want to approach your committee and discussion group. I feel really excited by the interest that has already been shown in the section, and all of the awesome people who have already volunteered their time and their energy to make this something really worthwhile. So I think we have a lot of great momentum, and, you know, a lot of this is that we're trying to provide a good structure for all of these ideas to kind of take root. So we want to be as flexible as we can be within the structure of ACRL and of the section, but we are just really excited about the ideas that everybody is bringing to these committees and discussion groups. So honestly, there's no limit to what we can do, and that's why I want to continue to engage people in the section and, you know, get more ideas and figure out how we can make them happen. So I'll just sort of leave on that note. I don't know, Chelsea, if you have anything else you want to follow up with.
I just want to give a huge shout out to you, Brianna, in the way that you gave a huge shout out to Megan for bravely leading us in the formation of the new section and keeping both a high-level view and a really detailed view of our activities going on at the same time. Cheers to you.
Well, thanks. That's nice of you to say. It's been fun. We've had fun together with this inaugural cohort of the Executive Committee. So with that, I think we'll let everyone go. Please do follow up if you have any questions for us or comments. And have a good day.
Bye, everyone.